Welcome, everybody, to the second webinar in a series of 3 webinars that are talking about AI and including it in the clinical trial research process. We are now on the second webinar where we're using AI-powered trial oversight to do a smarter decision-making during those trials. Our speaker, Quan Doan, is our subject matter expert here at SDC. He will be talking through this with you. And a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We'll answer all questions after the end of the session. And if you have anything that you would like to talk about, please also feel free to put it into the chat and we'll make sure to bring it up at the end of the session. You'll also be given an email where you can download and share this session that's being recorded. With that, I hand it over to Quan.
Thanks, Nina. Again, welcome everyone to part 2 of our AI and clinical research series. Again, my name is Quan Doan. I'm the VP of Technology Solutions here at SDC. And again, as Nina mentioned, today we're shifting from our previous webinar talking about security within AI to application of AI in clinical trial oversight, right? From managing risk to enabling smarter, faster decision-making across your clinical trials. So we'll cover a handful of things today. Again, why predictive KPIs are your best defense against costly delays, how to move from reactive to more proactive real-time oversight using AI, and then what leading sponsors are doing to integrate AI without overwhelming stakeholders. Back to my slides. There we go. So clinical trial oversight has traditionally relied on periodic reports, spreadsheets, and a hefty dose of experience-based intuition, right? Just think, in the past, from having to download SAS data sets from your various platforms, running programs, everything that you did was based on a point in time, and you had this gut feeling that you would, leverage from all of your experiences. Say, you know what, I think these are the trends and things that I want to look for. And that model may have worked really well when trials were simpler and smaller. But as we know, right, today's studies generate far more data spread across far more systems and stakeholders. So relying on gut instinct to try to catch these issues means that oversight is more reactive and often is too late, right? So you're looking at a lot of, reactive responses. Your data cleaning is later on in the process. And so you aren't identifying trends early on. And again, with the generation of the larger volumes of data with respect to wearables, right? Lots of disparate sources coming in, that makes it that much more complex to find meaningful trends, even within an application, but then across platforms as well. So with predictive oversight powered by AI, we do move into more of a proactive model. Instead of identifying issues after they've impacted the study, right? Or like halfway down through the process or past your IA, we're using real-time data combined with historical trend analysis and machine learning to forecast risk before it causes disruption or impact your study. So what's the premise behind all of this? Again, right, predictive oversight doesn't just improve issue detection, it helps you find it faster, smarter, and with greater confidence. It protects your timelines for your projects, right, ensures protocol adherence where possible, and reduce costly delays. So again, it's time to expand our definition of oversight quality, right? This is something that we've struggled with in industry for a little bit over time, right? As agencies have come down and have asked for more of that oversight from the sponsors, right, on their clinical trials. So oversight KPIs have long focused, again, on what's already happened, right? The number of site visits, how many queries have been issued, how long does it take to go from the time of the visit to time of data entry, STV, et cetera, right? And while these metrics do still provide lots of value, they do look backward on what's previously happened during the context of your clinical trial. Today, right, good oversight means shifting towards more predictive KPIs, things like deviation likelihood, right, dropout risk scores on your patients, and site performance forecasting. These types of indicators give teams a glimpse into what's coming next, and they're not only smarter or faster, but they're also very actionable, right? So these types of KPIs, predictive KPIs, drive prioritization. They help your clinical trial managers and your CRAs and your DMs focus on the riskier sites, the most vulnerable patients, right, who you most likely may lose, and give you options to help retain them and the most important and critical data. So this allows every organization to have a more efficient use of their oversight resources, and then that obviously leads to better study outcomes. So, right, back to AI and the definition of out there, right? Machine learning is at the crux of all of this, right? So we do have to leverage machine learning in order to leverage AI into powering up your insights and your oversight. So again, these models, while they're trained on historical data, right, think deviation, site metrics, dropout trends, we're formulating generalized patterns, right, across the industry to help predict future outcomes in live studies. One of the key things in here, though, is we have to be able to ingest all of that legacy data, right? So think of all of the clinical trial systems that you used in the past, right? All of that data that's captured from previous trials. We want to work with you in terms of getting all that information normalized, right? Whether it's things like monitoring trip reports, action items, right? Following those previous visits. These fundamentally form the baseline for your clinical trials, right? So leveraging all of that historical data to do the machine learning, and then that sets your baseline when you start a new trial to say, hey, based on this previous site information, site performance, metrics, deviations, now I can identify my risk levels for my sites kind of upfront. And then as data flows in for your current clinical trial, then the models then adjust, right? Then they can start highlighting potential emerging risks that might not be visible in traditional legacy dashboards that you have, and then flag those patterns across sites and patients that we as humans overlook, right? We all tend to have our own biases when we're reviewing our data, right? This is what I'm used to, this is what I'm used to seeing. And that's the beauty in leveraging machine learning and AI, is to look for those subtle type trends, right, that we may not have noticed or focused on because we haven't come across those types of issues in the past. So that kind of avoids those biases when doing manual reviews and relying solely on your gut instinct, which generally is right for most of us in the industry. So with machine learning in your oversight stack, you do stop playing catch up, right? You're alerted to those subtle anomalies early, giving your team time to review those and prevent issues, or at least mitigate them early on and not continue to have those exacerbate throughout the conduct of your clinical study. So risk scoring in action. So again, talking about some of the metrics and historical information that we need, right? So this ties a lot into RBM or RBQM, as you folks may have heard kind of laid out there in the industry. So we're going to turn this into some couple of real life examples here. So again, site risk scoring uses weighted variables to assess which sites are at risk of underperforming, right? Again, we touched on some of these things earlier: late data entry, high deviation frequencies, slow time to query resolution, or even low patient engagement if that information is captured. Again, each site is assigned a risk score, right? And we tend to use the stoplight analogy in our space, right? So color coding for easy triage. So green is your green, you're good to go, very low risk. Yellow is medium, and red signals, high concern. Again, using this type of model empowers your CRAs and your CTMs to deploy resources where they're needed most, right? Instead of treating all of the sites the same, right? You can focus highly on those problem sites, as it were, and to make sure you have meaningful impact and get them kind of back on track. Some key metrics that we would see, right, that you could leverage and apply this machine learning to is recruitment rate, right? So how fast do sites enroll their patients compared to target? This is information that I'm fairly certain most, CRAs and CTMs want to keep track of, because we do want to get to, enrollment faster, quicker, better, right? But then once you get those patients in, patient retention is also a key metric that we want to look at as well, right? So again, of your patients, right, being able to determine what those screen fail or dropout rates look like, and how long they remain on study over time. Data quality, so obviously accuracy and completeness of data collected at the site. So looking at metrics, again, from time to data entry to audit trail reviews to see how often sites are changing their data. again, queries, right? Volume of queries and timeliness to response all drive that data quality metric that we're looking for in our trials. We already talked about deviations in terms of protocol adherence. Again, are there massive trends? Are there specific criteria that are always being deviated from? And if we can start seeing those trends earlier, then that could lead to protocol amendments, right? To help eliminate that, or clarification letters that we see kind of distributed during the course of the trial. And then again, obviously a couple of other metrics around safety, right? Number and severity of adverse events. So again, how the scoring works, right? We do collect metrics on every single of those data points that we talked about earlier, right? We're going to normalize that across sites. So usually those are compared against enrollment rates, right? Or per patient, if you break those down with respect to like data changes or query rates, et cetera, right? And then that way we can compare apples to apples across all the clinical trial sites, regardless of whether they are a high enroller or a low enroller. We talked about the stoplight approach in terms of color scheme, right? And then we can display these things in heat maps, right? As you see here on the left-hand side of the screen, which allows us to quickly identify trends, right? Quickly identify our high risk or low risk sites and go from there. So again, these types of things, especially when you have that baseline already, right? Those first handful of visits you have on your earlier sites can help identify those trends. One, to help you identify potential mitigations for future sites as you're doing, scaling up other sites in other countries. Early detections and warning signs and symptoms for that helps you make, again, supports decision-making in terms of identifying sites that need improvement. For future trials, maybe specific to that indication or not. And so again, this is where we want to leverage a lot of that historical data to do that baseline, and then allow that to drive that, your current study to drive that ongoing learning that's happening, leveraging machine learning and AI. So again, one of those key metrics that we talked about earlier is patient retention, right? We know that's the biggest cost in clinical trials is recruitment. And once you get that patient, right, everything from that point on is what's critical. So we do want to try to be able to identify at-risk patients, right? Which patients are susceptible to dropping out. And that's where AI can help, right? It can predict which patients are at high risk of dropping out before it happens, right? You can look at models that analyze patient demographics, behavior patterns, right? How often are they coming on to their visits? Are they adhering to the visit windows, right? Are they doing their diaries, or if they're wearing wearables, are they, maintaining that compliance at all times? And allows, and how often do they interact with the sites? And that will allow you to see that indicator of, maybe they are starting to wean off, and what can we do to kind of maintain their interest in the trial, right? Are they getting the benefit that they're seeking while participating, right? These models don't just look at one variable, they synthesize dozens of signals, right, as we mentioned, to produce that risk score, whether at a patient level or at a site level, that can drive early intervention, right? And better retention, I think everyone on the call knows this, right? It means more complete data, faster studies, right? And fewer recruitment campaigns. So that's where AI can help, oversight teams protect their patient populations, right? And not have to find replacement patients, et cetera. So again, just by analyzing your visit patterns, right? How often they're coming in, what their wearable information or what their ePro, eCOA results look like, or compliance, right? That gives us that visibility into early interventions and improve overall retention, saving you both time and budget. And again, right, with AI, the big thing here is that, this does impact the entire project team, right? And every functional area kind of leverages AIs in different ways. So you don't have to be a data scientist to be able to leverage it. We do need them to help kind of train that model and understand your personas, right? So how everyone looks at data is different. And so that's where we want to kind of work with all of the teams, right? CRAs, they're going to want to receive real-time dashboards and highlight that risk level assessment across sites, right? That will help drive what their on-site visit priorities may look like, right? CTMs are going to look at predictive KPIs to run smarter daily huddles and align team focus. Data managers, as always, we're usually dealing with query triaging, right? And again, are these queries that are meaningful and have impact to our analysis, or are they areas where, we can make some improvements on our side to improve that data quality and evaluate, which sites are potentially at risk in terms of their quality and time to response. Again, statisticians, they're going to look at things slightly differently, right, with respect to metrics, but that can help them assess things like deviations for your ITT, right, or per protocol populations, right, and those signals will help them plan for those IAs, especially, if you have several IAs or those combination studies. We want to understand how that impacts power and patient recruitment, as early as possible to not have that downstream delay, right? So AI in general just democratizes that insight and that oversight. So every team member gets that timely targeted information to improve their part of the process, right? And as you know, right, with all of the individual pieces and the roles that we have, every piecemeal improvement that we can get within each functional area will contribute significantly to that overall timeline for your clinical project. And at SCC, again, we've talked about this previously on the last call. We are embedding, that machine learning and AI into the entire oversight experience, not as a bolt-on, but as part of our ecosystem, right? So one, we do have that closed loop AI model that we can train and fine tune, both, across indications and sponsors or within a single domain. So, we'll provide you that opportunity to opt in or opt out. And then train your model specifically to your space, your indication, your programs. We do have predictive dashboards that are easy to interpret that are being developed right now. Again, being able to pull in that CTMS data is very valuable in context of that overall clinical trial performance, right? And again, with validated KPIs tailored to your study and your regulatory expectations. The big thing in all of this, again, is the full transparency and auditability that we have within our platform, right? So being able to flag a response as this is a good response, this is meaningful, and being able to see the data queries behind it to understand how the system and how that AI is coming up with the responses and the metrics that they are. Being able to have that full visibility, provides that secondary layer of confidence in you while reviewing your metrics, right? So you don't need to be a data scientist to use our tools, right? But they're made for, for us, the clinical professionals aligned and to work in this space, right? Not just, a generalized AI vendor that may have worked in the finance sector or other things, understanding the regulations and really the personas that we're looking for with respect to reviewing our data. And again, right, as you're looking at evaluating AI tools, right, whether it's with SDC or someone else, we know that, you also need that oversight of your AI tools as well, because not all AI tools will deliver the same level of quality. And so again, the couple of things that we want to focus on, depending on whomever you choose to work with, right, with respect to joining the AI arms race, is the accuracy, right? How is that model being trained? Is it trained on relevant data for your TA, for your indication, for your programs? And if so, how do they get that data, right? The transparency around that learning in the AI. Can you explain what it's doing to a regulator, right? Is it reproducible in that sense? And does it work within your current systems, right? A lot of times you're going to be working on trying to implement a new tool, and does it exist within your current applications? Is an extension of that? You need to do integration work. How often is that data integration occurring? But also, how often is that machine learning model training and being updated as well, right? And then obviously, last but not least, is that trust. Is there validation of that application, of that AI machine learning model, whether it's with audit trail reviews, and is there clear lineage? Can you follow and can you trace that data all the way through? So again, just kind of reiterating here, you want to make sure that you are working with an AI partner that knows this space, that knows the industry, and mitigates risks instead of adding it. And you can use these criteria to find tools to deliver that clarity for you, right? And not just complexity. And in terms of to wrap up the call today, right? Here's what we covered. Oversight is evolving now from reactive to predictive, right? This is what the regulatory agencies are looking for, and this is what we want to get ahead of, because again, if we can prevent and mitigate delays in our trials, that's where we want to be, instead of trying to put the fire out, right? Once we've identified those issues. AI helps us get there. That enables that earlier intervention, that prioritization, and that better overall clinical trial performance, right? And again, this does impact every single member in your team, right? So we're seeing it used in protocol development. We're seeing it used to write CSRs, and we're starting to see more of that agentic AI that's starting to come into play with respect to starting to generate content, predictive KPIs, scoring items that can be used by each and every single team member on a daily basis to make their lives easier and to speed up that clinical trial pace. And every second or minute or day matters in our space, right? And then last but not least, right, that successful adoption means that we are picking a tool that's explainable, that's validated, and is aligned, workflow aligned to your workflow processes, right, to deliver that benefit. We know that AI, I don't think it's any longer a future concept. We've seen it kind of incorporated in bits and pieces. It's here to stay. And so let's embrace it with an open mind, and it's an opportunity for us to work smarter, stay compliant, and to improve outcomes. With that, I'll hand this over to Nina. Let's hear your questions. Let's see what oversight challenges your organizations are currently facing, and what types of predictive signals would help your teams the most.
Thanks, Quan, very much. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and one of the first ones was talking about the setup at the beginning. You had mentioned that ingesting the data is one of the most important first steps, and sort of that reservoir of data that is there. Have you any idea on how best to go about finding it, integrating it, leveraging it, because it's so vast and varied?
Yeah. So with respect to that, obviously the biggest one I think comes into play is, well, most EDC systems I know, have APIs that we can pull data from, right? But a lot of the metrics and things that we're looking for in terms of site performance typically reside with the CTMS platform. And so obviously the big players out there like Viva do have APIs, and they largely normalize that data. So, as long as we can get access to ingest that data, that'll be key. One of the big things really is sitting down as a team, also our data engineering team, sitting down with you as the CRA or the CTMs to understand how you look at the data and what metrics are most meaningful to you, right? And then we can scale back, look at that data that you've collected in your CTMS and say, will that give us the insights that you're looking for, right? Once we have that information identified and normalized, then we can feed it through to our AI machine learning model to then form those personas to then be able to apply to your clinical trials. Hopefully that answered your questions, but it really is understanding what data sources you have that support those metrics that you're looking for, and is it easily accessible for us to pull into our environment to help as the golden data set to train our models.
Thank you so much. And we had another question that came in regarding the stakeholders, and any suggestions on how to ease the concerns or win over perhaps various stakeholders that might have a little bit of AI inertia, and
Uh-huh.
simultaneously you have also the AI enthusiast. But how do you bring that kind of group together?
So I think for those groups, really involving them early in the process, right? So For the let's say for right now classified as anti-AI or AI averse folks, right? One is being able to instill confidence, right? We talk about that visibility, that transparency in terms of how that data is being evaluated and how it's being leveraged to be trained and those outputs. So that will help instill confidence in terms of what the product can actually do. And then two is really allowing them, being able to give them a space to play in it. I think, proof of concepts are great. That allows those that are a little bit more averse to go in there and play and see how those tools actually help their day to day, because it's not a replacement for what you do, right? We still, at least in the clinical trial space, we still want that human in the loop, right, to validate and to verify your gut instinct and the trends that are coming out, even the ones that we typically don't look at, right? But having the human in the loop to dive deeper and either confirm whether those trends are accurate or meaningful or impact the trial is key. And so being able to play in that sandbox, get more comfortable with it early on, will lead to that better adoption and acceptance of that AI tool. And then for the AI enthusiasts, it's the double-edged sword, right? It's the other way. They're going to jump headfirst in and may skip over those oversight areas, or may not, may take the result that is generated from your AI tools as right and true, right? And we know that there are still hallucinations that occur within AI. And so as you do start bringing on those tools, right, we do want to have those gut checks from time to time and understand how those models are being trained and know how they got to that output, right? So that's where that transparency is key. And so that's the fine balance that we have between kind of your AI enthusiasts and your AI averse folks.
That's really helpful, and certainly I think everybody has that conundrum in their respective organizations of that the difference between the AI enthusiast and the AI inertia crowd. But so thank you for answering that. And that's a good segue also into our up and coming third and final webinar around AI. You mentioned that it's not a replacement, but it's a complement to the human interaction and the human ability to be able to synthesize the information and get the insights to make much better, smarter decisions. So it's not a replacement. And that'll be the topic of our third webinar, which is on the 24th of June at the same time. Everybody's in various time zones, so it's the 12 noon East Coast time, United States. And we hope that everybody will join that session. If you haven't, you'll be getting an email to make sure to get it on your calendar. And we certainly do also appreciate those of you who had planned to attend last week and were able to shift your schedules for this week. It was an unforeseeable challenge that we had to deal with. And so we appreciate your flexibility, and thank you all for joining today. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and I hope you each have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.